It was late. The city buzz had faded into the quiet hum of distant traffic and flickering streetlights. Rain tapped against the window of an idling black car parked near an old diner on the edge of a worn-out neighborhood, inside the back seat. Thomas Mercer, CEO of Mercer Tech, and one of the country's youngest self-made billionaires, stared blankly at his phone. Dozens of notifications flashed across the screen. Board meeting reminders, investor emails, breaking news about his latest acquisition. He ignored them all, he felt, hollow. This was supposed to be the high point of his life. He had everything: money, power, a penthouse. Articles that called him a visionary. But that night, he'd just left his father's funeral, barely attended, coldly formal and full of people who came not to mourn, but to network. He couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere along the way, he'd traded pieces of his soul. For success, his driver, sensing his mood, offered softly, "Need anything, Mr. Mercer?" Thomas shook his head. Then, just as he glanced out the window, a small knock startled him. A girl, maybe 7 years old, stood outside in the rain. Her coat was too big, her shoes were soaked, but she was smiling up at him brightly. Boldly, he rolled the window down halfway. "Can I help you? You look sad, mister," she said, tilting her head. "Want to meet my mommy?" Thomas blinked, unsure what to say. "What? My mommy always makes me feel better when I'm sad. She makes warm cocoa and sings songs and gives the best hugs. You look like you could use all of that." He glanced around. No one else was nearby. "Where's your mommy?" "Just there." The girl pointed across the street to a small, flickering apartment building next to the diner. Against all logic, against the cautious voice in his head, something in him nodded. All right, he told his driver to wait, stepped out into the rain, and let the girl lead him. They climbed a narrow staircase, past peeling paint and the smell of something cooking. The hallway was dim, but the girl seemed at home. She stopped at a door and knocked with a rhythm too short, one long. The door creaked open. A woman in her mid-30s appeared, her eyes wide with concern. "Leela, where have you been? I told you not to wander." She looked sad. "Mommy," the little girl said, "so I brought him." Thomas stepped into the light. The woman froze. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "She approached me outside, said I looked sad. I didn't mean to intrude." The woman blinked, recognizing his face. "You're Thomas Mercer, the Mercer." He nodded awkwardly. "Guilty." The woman hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Well, come in. You already made it up 3 floors in this building. That alone earns you a cup of cocoa." Her apartment was tiny, but warm. A little messy, but full of life drawings on the fridge, fairy lights along the wall, the smell of cinnamon in the air. It was the kind of place where laughter lingered in corners. He sat awkwardly on a faded couch. The woman introduced herself as Grace. She was a single mom, worked 2 jobs, and somehow still had time to sing bedtime songs and draw with her daughter. That night, over cocoa and gentle conversation, Thomas opened up in a way he hadn't in years. He told them about his father's cold ambition, about the empire he built but never loved, and the emptiness success had left behind. Grace listened, not like a shareholder, not like a journalist, like a human dot. By the time he left, Lila was asleep. On her mother's lap, Thomas looked back one last time and said, "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed this." Grace smiled. "Sometimes the soul just needs to sit down. You're welcome any time." Weeks passed, and Thomas did come back at first. He brought small gifts for Leela Book, a stuffed animal, then groceries, then repairs for the apartment building. But the biggest change wasn't what he gave, it was what he got. He laughed again, ate homemade meals, learned to listen, learned to be still. And grace-smart, resilient Graceby came more than just a kind stranger. She became the voice that reminded him he was still human. She didn't want his money. She wanted his honesty. One evening, as the sun poured gold across the small living room, Thomas knelt beside Leela and asked, "Remember the night you came to my car in the rain?" She nodded. "You saved me." She smiled. "Told you, mummies. Hugs are magic." He looked at Grace, then back at Lila. "What if I want that magic forever?" Grace's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded, and from that day on, the man who once ruled towers of glass and steel chose a life with a chipped coffee mug, a warm kitchen, and a girl who once knocked on his window and said, "You look sad, mister," and he was never sad again.